Hello everyone, this is Ethical Hacking Tutorials. Welcome to the Linux tutorials today, and we will be discussing the Linux directory structures, mount points, why are they required, why we create them, why we have so many of them, and what does these special folders we don't know the meaning of stands for. Let's just go to the root of our file system and list all the files present in here by ls-la, and we can see a bunch of folders here starting with dot and double dot. You can also notice that these two things, dot and double dot, are present inside every other folder on your system. The other folders in our root file system, that is a single slash. This contains boot, dev, etc, home, and many other folders. We will look into what does these stand for. So we will just roll over to our file explorer, or say Natulus in Linux, and when we start this file explorer, we begin from this home folder, but we will go back to this other locations and computer. For many Linux distributions, these partitions are also listed here already, but I'm using Kali Linux and it is listed under other folders. When we open this our file system, or say computer, which is also denoted by a single slash here, this is our root folder, not root folder, root file system. Actually, every other thing on our system is accessible through here in some or other ways, navigating through some or other directories. So everything on our system, whether even if you create a separate mount point or separate partition, this will be accessible through here anyways. This contains every other file on our Linux systems, and every other mount point will be present here. First directory we see is bin. Now what is bin? Bin contains every executable files, or say binaries. These are used during booting or repairing files, and the programs here are usually single user mode programs such as cat or tar. You can create zip files. This does not require administrator privileges. The boot folder contains files in order to boot our system efficiently. It contains files such as Linux kernel, or say grub in case, and we will also come back to this boot folder later. The dev, or say devices, this contains files for all the hardware devices on our machine, because it is a common analogy that everything in Linux is a file. Even your devices are files, so you might see files such as your CD-ROM, or you can see disk here. Everything is a file in Linux, and so are your devices. The etc folder, this contains the configuration files for your applications. Applications can configured and customized through the files in here. Every application has a startup and shutdown script also, which is also present in this etc folder. The home folder, the most important folder, or say for a user's perspective, the most important folder on your Linux system, where all your personal files are stored there. This is much like my documents or a user profile folder in Windows. The folders in home folders are user 1 and user 2. These can be anything based on your usernames in computer. These usernames are standard users and not the root users. The root users home folder is little different, present as root in the file system. Next are libraries. You can see 4 of these. Each Linux distribution implements this in a very different way, but commonly these are library folders, and these contains files and libraries for your programs to execute. Suppose 4 programs requires a one single library. We cannot have the one single library at each different places, so creators of Linux manage to keep all the library files segregated in this folder, that is libraries. It also contains the kernel modules and shared library images required to boot system and run commands in root file system. The next is media folder. Media folder is temporary mount directory created for removable media disks such as USB. If anything you plug into your system and this appears on your desktop here, this is just because this media folder. And you can see this CD-ROM folder in many other distributions. This CD-ROM folder is present somewhere here in root folder, not root folder in our root disk, because just for backward compatibility anyways, who uses CD-ROM these days. The next is MNT folder, or say mount folder. This is temporary mount directory for mounting file systems. Each system mounts file systems, say hard disk, in a very different way. In most of the cases this is present in our mount folder. If you have some external disk, or say if I had some disks present here and I would click to mount it, it would be automatically mounted at this MNT location. The next is optional, or say this is this contains the programs that you install from other than the repositories, such as if you install Android Studio or you try to install Google Chrome, this will come here in the optional directory because these are optional applications. Process folder, the PROC, this folder contains every running processes as a file. You can see so many folders here with numerics. These are actually processes ID, say PIDs running on your system. The root folder, the root in root folder, or say the root folder in your root disk, is actually the home directory of the root user. The root user, who is also the administrator of system, contains his personal files in here. The root folder, this is home directory for the root user, unlike this home folder which is the home directory for other users non other than root. This root folder is the home directory of only the root user. The run directory, the run directory is a clean solution for early runtime problem. That is, it contains the runtime files. Earlier this directory was present somewhere in this var folder, but this folder was not easily accessible during the boot time. So now we have a different run directory so that we can boot efficiently and run some services during the boot time. The next is sbin folder. As the name already suggests, sbin, we already had a bin folder. The sbin folder contains binary executables for programs required by system administrators. These programs such as fdisk or network configuration or srv folder, or say service. This directory contains server specific files. Suppose you are running a server. Actually this folder is implemented in a different way on different Linux distributions. Might be the case where your Fedora or CentOS or Debian has a different configuration. The sys folder, this is a virtual file system which stores or even say allows configuration or modification of the devices connected to your system. This is not included in every Linux distribution since it is only a modern Linux distribution folder. Temp folder, the temp folder also holds the temporary files, and one thing to keep a note of, that the file size in this folder is limited and these files get erased or say deleted when you reboot your system. The next is USR. Don't get again confused it as users. This is Universal System Resources in Linux. This contains executable binaries or say documentations or kernel headers for your Linux system. Var folder, so variables, we say this in Linux. Content of these directories are basically backups, cache, and another temp we can see here, run, spool, or www. We can see the cache folder, and last night I updated my system, so a lot of files in here. So now you know what does this var stands for. We also have the www, that means web hosting files here. And now we will see why we create a different mount point for partitions. Suppose you have a different a complex system where you want to keep your boot as a separate mount partition and your home as a separate partition and where as a separate partition. Why? Suppose you have a boot folder or say a EFI setup where you want your system to be more stable and you want your system's boot to be readable by other Linux or say Windows distributions. So you might have a separate mount point for this boot. Anyways, in any case, no matter how many mount points you create under Linux, everything is accessible under this root directory /disk and the home folder. In particular, this is very important because you don't want to lose your files, and all your files are by default present here. So you might allocate a big chunk of your hard disk space to this home folder, and based on your very specific or complex needs, you might assign this var folder also a different directory or say a different disk space, because in case you are uploading files or running a web server and your users are uploading files and they are in order of GBs, so you might end up exhausting your whole disk space. So why not separate this and make it a different disk or partition, so that if in any case the disk space is exhausted, your system is still running because this is on a different partition. The same is the case for this SRV folder. These two are actually much likely same. This is especially for web servers or say FTP servers, and this contains many other things as well. So this was all about the Linux directory structure. And again, one thing to mention, what are these two dots which are present in every directory is here. Suppose you go type cd dot dot, how does this go back or a previous level? Because two double dots here are a pointer to your previous directory, and this single dot is a pointer to current directory. So this was all about our Linux directory structure. We will be covering more about Linux in further videos. Keep in touch with ethical hacking tutorials or ethicalhackx.com. Give suggestions and comments, and for any further clarifications we are always open. Thank you for watching.